everybody, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Avon Van Hassel. I'm a self-published author, and I'm here every Wednesday to give you tips and tricks for things to try in your writing. This week, I want to talk about something that's been heavy on my mind, which is what to do when you just can't write. Now, there are a lot of reasons for why you might not be writing. For a lot of people, there are mental health issues like depression. You have ideas, you have the drive, you just can't do it. For a lot of people, there's a lot of busyness in their lives and they just can't find time. I'm going to put up in the eye, wherever it goes, a link to a video I made about how to find time. Sometimes you don't really know where you want to go. And the outlining isn't helping as much as you want it to. Sometimes you're not really sure where to go with your story. You have an idea, but that's all it is. And sometimes you have writer's block. Now, I have a lot of feelings about what writer's block actually is. A lot of people have a lot of different ideas. A lot of people say it's a myth at all. A lot of it tends to come down to what's called imposter syndrome, which is something that's been discussed a lot lately, especially in creative circles, which is essentially when you start getting some measure of success, either with other people or just feeling like you're enjoying your own work, you start to feel a bit like a fraud. And you start to feel like you're not worthy of the praise because whatever it is you're doing is somehow less valid than what other people are doing. Basically, it's comparing yourself to other people and getting down on yourself. Or if you are, or if you do like what you're putting out, then you start to feel like you cheated somehow, or that other people don't recognize the bad things. You know what I mean? It's essentially one of those classic things of when somebody gives you a compliment and you're like, why? You know what I mean? That happens to a lot of us, especially as introverts, especially more modest people. We live in a society right now that values creativity and looks down on it at the same time. So we all are rabid consumers of things like movies and books and TV shows and art generally. However, if you decide to pursue a career in art, it's not a real job. So we have to constantly find that balance between this feeds my soul and it is valid at the same time. Like, can you have a job for yourself that isn't a soul-crushing job? Anyway, that's a rant for another time. I'm going to get into some ideas of what to do when you can't write. Now, we just passed Nano, and when I say just passed, I mean quite a bit, but time moves kind of funny for me right now. And I didn't meet my initial goal, but I met the goal that I adjusted for myself, and it was very, very frustrating because I had a great outline. I had motivation. I knew where I was going. I knew how to get there. I had all the groundwork laid. I couldn't do it. I hit the ground so hard at the beginning and it was going great and I was pacing myself and then I just couldn't do it. And it was so frustrating because all the pieces were there. I just couldn't. So it's very difficult to get out of that sometimes. So I understand if that's where you are in your journey. So I do have some ideas because even though they won't contribute to the word count during a Nano event, they will still keep getting you moving forward in your overall longer term goal. Okay? So my first suggestion is outlining. I'm always going to beat that outlining drum because your outline is your skeleton. And if you don't have a skeleton, then you just have a squishy mass of flesh, and that's not nice. So if you don't have an outline, make one. If you do have an outline, see if there are any places where there are holes. See if there are any places where you can add a bit more detail, a bit more structure, or if there are places where you can factor in sort of if this then that flexibility. Because I like to leave a little bit of room for magic to happen. So when you're in the moment, sometimes a character or a situation will go a different way than you planned, and you realize actually that's a lot better and we're going to run with it. Unfortunately, at that point, the rest of your outline sort of falls apart and you have to re-outline, which is not a failure. That is perfectly normal and good. In fact, your ideas should evolve over time. That's how we learn and grow. So don't be afraid to let that happen. Just be prepared to adjust and roll with it and restructure the outline to get maybe not back on track with your original outline, but back on track with an outline that is then workable going forward with this new plan. And that does also make the story feel a little bit more dramatic, but also organic and less like boxed in. You know what I mean? Sometimes you're reading a story and you're like, it's tropey as hell and you know exactly where it's going and exactly what's going to happen because it was telegraphed a mile away. Sometimes shifting gears in the middle of the story kind of keeps the reader on the back foot and then they don't necessarily know what's coming. Sometimes too much of this can be a bad thing because you don't really want to mess with the expectation too much, because really the main takeaway is going to be the emotional payoff for the reader. But you do want to sort of keep them guessing a little bit. I've been doing a lot of research on publishing, and one of the other things that kind of slows me down in my writing is this sort of these expectations that I totally put on myself. Nobody else puts them on me. But you want to write the perfect book. You need the right word in the right place at the right time, and you can agonize over it forever. And if it's not perfect, you start to feel like, oh, I'm just not in the headspace for this right now. I just can't. Just the tap is not on, the muse is gone. I didn't mean that to rhyme, but anyway. So I feel like that's another contributing factor to why it might be difficult to write. And I have to keep reminding myself that at the end of the day, what make or breaks a good book to most people's standards is whether or not the promise that is made at the beginning of the book is fulfilled by the end of it. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean a happy ending. It just means a satisfying ending. You know what I mean? Sometimes that can be dark, but it just has to make sense. There has to be an emotional payoff where the reader goes, okay, that makes sense. So that's so much more important than things like word choice, like things like a likable character. So these are things to consider, and maybe ease up on yourself a little bit and maybe don't spend so much time agonizing. But if the story isn't working, the story needs to be fixed. First and foremost, always the story needs to be fixed. It needs to be right. So if you're stuck, go back to your outline. And if your outline's fine, maybe, is there a place where it's maybe not as fine as it could be? So that's outlining. Second thing is research. Especially if you're writing something historical or if you're writing something about a way of life that is different from your own, do a lot of research, because I guarantee you there is going to be something that you didn't know. And as much detail, within reason, as you can put in, the more real it's going to feel. That's two now. So always find time to research. And this kind of feeds into my third point, which is character and setting development. So this is going back to my world building section or video series that I did, and it's going to feed into my character building series that I'm going to do after this video. And there is never too much world building or character development behind the scenes. There can be too much in the actual body of the text. An info dump should be well placed, and that can be tricky. But as far as your own notes go, there is no amount of detail that's too much. So If you're at a point where you can't work and you can't lay down words and you can't work on plot and the outline is fine, or you're not in the mood to outline right now, which is totally understandable because that's a lot of work, maybe start working on, scenes and settings or things about your characters. So this goes back to the empty chair interviews, or find some questionnaires online. There are a lot of questionnaires for like D&D characters, for like when people roll up characters really quick in the middle of a campaign because their original character died. At some point I'm going to do a video on how to roll up D&D characters as your characters. So like making character sheets for your book characters. I have one for all of my characters and they come in so handy. So there are a lot of character questionnaires out there for role-playing games. You can think of like minor settings in your books. So if your character spends a lot of time in their bedroom, what exactly does it look like? What's the pattern on their bedspread? What are the posters on their walls? Do they have a lot of this going on? How messy is their closet that they have to arrange their phone so that you can't see it? That sort of thing. So what exactly is in their room? And of course, the vast majority of this detail is never going to come up in the book. I'm going to do another video at some point about how much detail is necessary for both characters and settings. And so stay tuned for that. But it doesn't hurt to have too much. You know what I mean? Only you need to know. But if you know, then that helps with deciding what the audience gets to know later on. There are some authors who have like literally thousands and thousands of pages of history, of backstory, of character descriptions, of setting descriptions. Like they know everything about their worlds. I'm a little bit lucky because my world is sort of, I know enough about this particular historical period, and I know enough about England and Wales, and I know enough about like fairy tale or fantasy worlds that I can sort of like roll with it. But there are places where like I have Sims houses for all my major houses. I have Sims of all my characters. I have character sheets of all my characters. I have MBTI profiles for all my characters. So there is a lot of research that goes into it. So that's all stuff to consider. And it does count, okay? Writing is hard. People who don't write don't get it. There is so much that goes into it. It's not just sitting down and writing a cute little story. That's one of the drafts. There's so much stuff that goes on that nobody ever sees. And then there's all the agonizing, and then the redrafting, and the editing, and the beta reading. Like, it's endless. It's a huge amount of work, and people who don't write don't get it. So if you get a lot of crap for not having a real job, that's crap, because it is a real job, and it's a lot of work. And people enjoy reading books, but they have no respect for people who write them, and that's crap. So you're valid. So my next piece of advice is drawing and journaling. These are kind of, for this purpose, kind of the same thing, more or less. Just one is visual and one is verbal. So if you're artistic at all, in a visual sort of way, this might be a great way for you to figure out what your characters look like, but also their general vibe. It isn't a bad idea to do things like mood boards, because sometimes when you're creative in a different direction, different things come out than you expected. And that's always fun to discover too. And then journaling, I like to do sort of a stream of consciousness where I just start talking, and then it just eventually stuff comes out that I didn't expect. There are a bunch of times in my books where there are twists that are a result of, well, that just happened and I didn't see it coming. So, and journaling is a great way to access that, but also a great way, I think, to kind of work through why you can't write. You know what I mean? Like, if it is something about, oh, it's just so much work and I just don't have time for it right now, then that's your reason. And then you can figure out how to make time for it, or you know what to do about that. If it turns out that you're just really super insecure about it, then you've identified the issue there and you can figure out how to work with it. You know what I mean? So journaling can help you get to the bottom of what your problem is and then work out ways to get around it. Drawing can work as that way, but it can also work back in the research and world building, character development way. Because, you know, if you just have like a little doodle, then that can help you work out some issues as well, but also it can help in a sort of like literally illustrative sort of way. So you can use it to make visual representations of things that happen in your stories. They help you get a clearer idea of what's going on. And my last piece is, and this is going to sound very Southern California, New Age, millennial hippy dippy stuff, but self-care is a big one because so many creatives deal with mental health issues, because so many creatives deal with things like imposter syndrome is one, but also things like burnout and low self-esteem and that sort of thing. It really is important to take care of yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So when you're feeling down on yourself, it's important to look at why that is and figure out what in your life is lacking that you can try to fill or replace. Sometimes you just need rest, and that's fine too. Like, you don't have to be producing all the time to be valid. You can just rest. But there are ways to sort of do both. One of my favorite things to do when I'm behind on word count is I like to put a hair mask in, because I have low porosity hair and my hair needs a lot of moisture. So when I put a hair mask in before I take a shower, I have to sit with that thing in like a shower cap for like 2 hours. And that gives me a nice, neat little bracket of time where I can't really do anything else because I've got goo in my hair. And what am I going to do with that 2 hours? Yeah, I can watch YouTube. I can watch TV, I can listen to my podcast or an audiobook, I can play with my cat or whatever. But I can also like work. That's 2 hours. That's a bracket of time, right? If you're really good, you can also put on a face mask and I guess like foot lotion or something. You can like load up all the self-care stuff and then just write while you're not doing anything else, while you just have to sit there and chill. You might as well work on some of your story. So I like to kind of combine rituals that way, if that makes sense. Just kind of, I'm doing this for myself and I can't go anywhere and I can't do anything. So I might as well also research or also work on my outline because I've got 2 hours. And it's a neat little sort of, you don't know how, it's not one of those open-ended things where you don't know when it's going to end, or, you know, you got someplace to be, or, you know, you've already bracketed this time out for your hair or whatever. So you might as well use it because there's no other demands on that time. So that's just an example. I'm sure there are things in your life where you can figure out, well, I'm already doing this, I might as well do this also. So give some of those suggestions a try. Let me know if they work for you in the comments. Let me know if you have any other suggestions of things that have worked for you. And if you know of anybody who would benefit from these ideas, go ahead and share this video. Also, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell, because I am going to be releasing a 5-part series on character building, and I will at some point, one of these days, I swear to God, if it kills me, and it might, I'm going to do a series on The Sims for character and world building. I swear to God, I'm going to find a way to do it. I'm going to. So that's going to be fun, because it's going to be full of frustration and swearing, because that's Sims culture. But it is also, this is play and work at the same time, which is my favorite combination of things after chocolate and peanut butter. And then I am going to have a video at some point, depending on how the Sims things go, on how much description of characters and settings to put in your stories. And then I'm probably going to do a couple more of like historical cooking, because that was a lot of fun. And I might do a couple more Take Off the Day with Me, and we'll see how those go. So I have a lot of plans, and hopefully I'm going to be able to execute some of them. And so if you hit the bell, you'll be able to see those when they come out. So I've had a lot of fun with this video, and I hope it has helped you, and that it might help some people that you know, if you know any creatives who are struggling with this sort of thing. And yeah, let me know in the comments. I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.